So our first question to you is, sadly, as previous stats help um, indicate that EC community is often quite invisible in wider society. How does that make you feel?
For me, I always feel quite exasperated about it because despite race equity efforts making huge surges since 2020, obviously with so much that was going on, Black Lives Matter and COVID and everything, when ED&I became a must-do for organisations, and the fact that we are 1 million strong in the UK, so that's the answer to that poll. Um, EC people and the issues that we face are largely forgotten or unacknowledged. And I think they were only really kind of briefly being addressed during the peak of anti-Asian hate crimes and the media bias that was going on during the pandemic. So for me and for many others, I feel like this just needs to change.
So to make people more visible and have a greater voice, what can organisations do to support this?
I think there's two main tips I would give. One would be to look at their current diversity. So like how big is that percentage of people, EC people, and how can they record other EC people without lumping them as Asian other in their kind of diversity data? Because obviously they might record Chinese, but they won't really record any others. And how can they encourage them to share their ethnicity in different ways? So whether that's adding more options or having a free text box. And then how are their recruitment processes and biases or perceptions of EC people strengthening the barriers they face in the workplace, which is what I do a lot of talks around as well. Because like I said, there are 1 million of us in the UK. So do your numbers and your targets reflect that when you're looking at how you're trying to improve different groups within your workforce diversity? And then secondly, I think while there is a slight increase in EC people in some external marketing efforts, so you might have seen them in some adverts, it begs the question is like who's behind them? So are EC voices and talent getting a say in that? I believe that while we are seeing this increase on the outside, internally that dial isn't shifting, which is obviously why what I'm talking about in the first bit, because there are only 0.27% of EC people in positions of power in the workplace, which is really quite shocking, really. So 0.27% of 1 million is, nothing, a few thousand, really. So I think if you want to increase visibility in your adverts, but think it's hard to find us, I think that's a excuse a lot of them come up with. I know that simply isn't the case, and I believe organisations who use that excuse just aren't actively looking hard enough. So I think that's the other thing.
Brilliant, thank you. And so the theme for this year is changing seasons. What is the call to action? How can organisations participate in that?
Well, obviously, changing seasons is quite a broad sort of theme. It can be interpreted both tangibly and metaphorically. So it can represent the cyclical nature of life from diverse seasonal cuisines, of which obviously EC cuisine is very diverse, and the literal changing of seasons. So, for example, some people might have heard of something called Mid-Autumn Festival, which is an important date in some EC cultures, and that takes place around September and October time. So that kind of fits in quite nicely. And then it goes on to our evolving identities and the ever-changing political landscape, which involves us as well. So I think it's there for people to run with however they like. But I think if organizations can just do one thing new, just looking at the poll previously where so few people were saying that organizations were doing anything for it is, unsurprising, but, quite sad as well. So for me personally, I think it's about changing. The theme is about changing perceptions and doing so both in and out of work. So however, and if people want to use that theme, I think EC Heritage Month should first and foremost be about celebrating and supporting EC people and our inclusion in society, using it as a catalyst for change in the future. And I think it's just would be a wonderful opportunity for organisations to shine a spotlight on the community so that we're not forgotten, like we said before.
So one thing we came across, Choon, was your example at Specsavers, if you'd like to share that.
Yeah, so I talked on LinkedIn, I'm quite vocal about EC representation. So and something I came across recently when going through a lot of things around my sort of eyesight and things like that. So as a Specsavers patient and knowing that EC people have high rates of short-sightedness, I was extremely disappointed to see a complete lack of EC people in any of their adverts. So you can see them on like social media. There's lots of TV adverts from them at the moment as well. So I decided to raise this with them, and I sent them an email asking them why this was the case and what they were going to do about to address this. Um, and in their reply, which I posted on LinkedIn, their reply spoke of commitments to change, on the other hand, they also argued, like I said, that they found that EC representation in talent pools was lacking. Um, but in my experience, to my knowledge, that isn't true. I've seen EC people in adverts. I know EC models and actors, so it's not difficult to find. And I think that sadly goes back to my other answer, my answer to the first question, and I think it's a classic example of ticking many diversity boxes. They had Black people, South Asian people, older people, younger people, all sorts of different people, from disabled people, from different walks of and areas of life, but no EC people. And I think it was just really obvious, and it was just ignoring us and forgetting about us. So hopefully we will see a change in the future.